So, good evening, everyone. I'm so happy you could make it this evening. Karen and Rebecca told me that there were 54 people that were registered for this. And I know they'll be waiting for the recording, but it's so nice to know that people are still interested, especially as the cooler months come up. These tend to get really popular. And a lot of people, especially if it's Monday Night Football, people sometimes wait for the recording. So, um, for those that don't know me, I see there's some new names. My name is Anita Thompson, and I teach art workshops for libraries, and it's my absolute favorite thing to do. So thank you for being here. This is for Wrightstown Library, and Karen and Rebecca picked this one, and I really like this one. I think it's especially good for this time of year. I've been seeing a lot of squirrels running all over the place. So I love it. I think they're confused though. I don't think they know whether or not they should be gathering nuts or laying in the sun. I think although it's getting a little cooler, so maybe they're like, okay, we better keep gathering. So anyway, we are going to be needing a white colored pencil, a regular, just number 2 pencil, and then also sort of a kind of like a felt tip black pen or a micron pen. And then we're using gray toned paper. Oh yeah, you can absolutely snap a pic. Let me move this over here. And should I do it a little bit closer? Let's see. Oh, and Joan's coming in. I'm going to do it closer for you. Welcome, Joan. You're welcome. Okay, and I will get closer with my camera too here because I realized first of all I'm a little bit killywampus here, and then I should also be a little bit closer. Okay, so the first thing we are going to be starting with is our pencil. As you can see, this is in landscape mode, not portrait mode. I suppose you could do it portrait mode, but since we have some, landscape to cover, I kind of liked to do it in this way. So we're going to get started here, and a reminder that you want to be making very light lines when you're drawing. Mine are always darker because of Zoom. So we're going to get started with the shape of our squirrel first. And sorry, let me just adjust this one more time. There we go. So we're going to make the overall shape of our squirrel. And so we're going to start here at the head. Oh, Zoom user is coming on. Hopefully that's someone legit. We're starting off at the head here, and we're going to start off with the ears. And again, yours should be a lot lighter than mine. So, you want it to be there, but you want to be able to basically see it. But we're going to be lightening it up and also, adding in the pen anyway. So his little ear here, we're starting with the head, as you can see, and he's got a little ear happening on the other side. That's sticking out, and it looks smaller because it's on the other side. And we're going to go for his nose here. And start to also create the shape of his bottom mouth here. And then I will make sure that everyone is sort of caught up here. And I'm also going to go in a little closer. Everybody get caught up. Good to see everybody tonight. I'm just scrolling through. I know I saw some of you as you came on. Okay. All right. So now we're going to start with the rest of the body. We'll go back and we're going to start now with the back of his head. And I made this a little bit too lumpy here. So it's going to kind of come down a bit like so. And I kind of create a little crease here just with my pencil for now. And then we start to create the rest of him. His back is arching. And then you're going to almost go, it's almost straight down, but it's curved as you're going down, like so. And then we get flat for his legs, sort of his hind legs. And we're going to kind of leave it like that. And we're now going to go back to his head and his arms. So I think I have to make his head just a little bit smaller here. And I'm just going to fix the shape of his ear as well. Okay, so coming back here, we have a little bit of a curve right here to the bottom of his mouth. And then we've got some fur here. So you can kind of make it look like this. And then we have the shape of his little hands coming out here. Now, again, it's going to be, we're going to be having fur around there. But for now, you kind of want to get a shape in of his arm, like so. He looks like a cat right now. And then we've got his little hands happening here. So we kind of go upward for his thumb area. And then we leave that blank. And we're going to create another curve and sort of the full shape of his hand like this. So it's going to kind of look like a little Lego figure. Have you ever seen the Lego figures and their hands? It's going to kind of look like that shape. He's a Lego squirrel. And then once we have that, we'll come back to that to add our acorn, but we're going to come back to the rest of his body here. So we have his, both of his legs here. So we're going to start right underneath his elbow for the curve of the legs. And we're going to curve around. And this is for the back leg. So again, we want to kind of create a shape for 3 of his toes, just so we have it in the spot. And then from that same shape, you're going to then come down and create the other leg. So you can see it's kind of curving. And then again, the shape, and we'll go back. And I'm going to make him a little bit taller. Kind of fit a little better with that. But that's sort of his shape of where, the leg is coming in. Can do a little bit of a curve there. And then we're going to create the shape of the tail. Now, like I said, we're going to go back and we'll add the details, but for now, we're just kind of getting in our basics. So we're going to come back now to the back of him, to his little back, and I'm going to arch him a little more on mine. He's got a little bit of a bump here. And then it kind of goes down a little bit for his back. And then there's sort of another bump. Like so. And we're going to start with the tail right at the top. So basically at the top of him, because it starts to curve. And here again, we're going to be creating the basic overall shape of his tail. So we're thinking about, how wide the fur is going to come out. And I like to think of it as there's almost like an imaginary line here. So I'm going to draw that line. And the reason, let me fix it like that. And the reason I say that is because the fur is going to you're going to kind of create the fur from this line. And I'll show you once we start doing that. But I kind of wanted you to be aware of that imaginary line. And now let's continue and create the rest of the shape of the tail. Sorry, I thought I saw somebody come in, but we're good. We're still good. Okay. All right, so now we're going to come around. It's going to come out a little bit and then go back towards the bottom of our squirrel, like so. And all of a sudden, we now have the shape of our squirrel. I'm just fixing him a little bit. Making him a little rounder. And before we go back in and create the details for him, we're going to go to the landscape, but I'll give everybody another minute, in case you need to do any corrections. I know I went kind of fast with that whole thing, so, you can kind of take a look at everything, see if anything needs adjusting. I always do the same, and I always see something that needs adjusting. Okay. Okay, so back at it here. So we're now going to come over here and we're going to create the rocks and basically the ground. And so we're going to start off on the left side here. And basically we're going to be creating sort of lines to indicate that there is ground, and we will start to create rocks as well. So let's create sort of a bumpy line here. And then we're going to start to make 3 rocks over here. And those are going to kind of look like this shape. And they're kind of staggered on each other. So here's one, here's another one. And then we have the hint of another one. Actually, I think this one's a little closer. Yeah. And we have some indications of leaves. That's kind of what these shapes are. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but basically we are making some leaves on the ground as well. So I'm kind of going to go straight across here. We have some sort of leaves in the background here, along with a little mushroom, two mushrooms actually. So we start to create sort of a bumpy area for those, and we start with our mushroom shape. Got the toadstool. And we have kind of like the indication of a small one right next to it. And we have some other rocks. I realized I made mine a little bit closer, a little too close to the edge this time, but you get the idea. Um, just making it look like that there are some other things happening on this landscape here. Leaves and rocks. Here's some more kind of laying leaves over here. We have one here. They're kind of together a little bit. And we're going to make our way across to the left just to finish up with that landscape area. Meaning there's, here's another kind of leaf, wilty looking leaf. And we have another one here. And then finally, some more rocks over here on the left. And then I will let everybody catch up. We also have, some grass coming out of the rocks on the left, but I'll let everyone catch up with this first because I know that was a lot. And when you're ready, we have some, greenery happening over here on the left, just some grasses. Behind that rock. Okay, so now we are going to go back up to our squirrel and start adding some details. Move this up a little bit. And I'm now going to go just a little bit closer to start adding those details in. Oops. It's a little, there we go. Okay, so we're going to start off with the face here. We're going to add an eye. So we're going to come from the nose. Here's our nose. And if we do that, we're going to kind of go diagonal, and the eye shape is going to happen in between. So, and I just kind of made it a football shape eye. Right, and he's got, a little bit pointy toward the part near his nose, and then even a little bit, on the other side as well. But he's looking a little more, oh, he's looking a little more like a squirrel, a cat squirrel. He looks like a cat squirrel. And we'll make the eyeball by then going in and just adding a curve there to the eyeball. I'm just seeing what the light is doing for everybody. That's okay. And then we're also going to make sure we add the highlight by drawing that space in, since we're going to be covering that with our pen. But we want to kind of draw that out. And then we are going to finally come down to his little paws there. And we're going to create the acorn that he's holding. So in the top part, we first make the stem, and it's sort of a curved cylinder with a circle on the end. I'm going to kind of hold this up a little bit. You can see it's kind of floating into space because we're then going to be making the acorn hat. I still call them acorn hats. And with the acorn hat, that is going to go, basically the shape of it is kind of going to be this shape, and it's going to be hanging down to the right, and the little bumps are going to be going over his hands. So we'll make the hands first, but we'll also make the shape of the acorn that's hanging down. And it's kind of, roundish, and it comes to a point at the bottom. You can only see part of it, and you can see even less on the other side. Let me make this a little more pointy, like so. And then the top of our acorn hat is going to be really a bunch of, they look like almost bubbles, or the bottoms of bubbles. And we have a one layer, and then kind of one more layer underneath it a little bit, kind of hanging off here to the side. So we make those little details, and I will just show that a little closer. Okay, excuse the adjusting of my camera here. All right. So now we're also going to go into his hands, and we just make kind of 3 curved lines. Like here's one, so that it separates his little fingers. Here's another. And then I always add like one more little one on the end there. I'm just going to show that up close. So again, I made kind of 3 curved lines so that it indicates that he's holding the acorn. I make kind of a little bump there for a fourth little finger, I guess you would call that. And then we're also going to just go down and create the same for his feet. We kind of create the same shape, except we come at it from the top and make like rounded, almost like kind of rounded fingers, and then they're flatter at the bottom. And we do the same over here too. So you may have to do some erasing. And I like to make the middle foot a little bit kind of stick out a little bit. Like so. Okay, so our next step is going to be using our pen. First, though, we just want to go to the one ear here and create the inside of the ear, the inside shape, like about right here. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to be using the pen, and then we'll go back and we'll add some shading to that. And then we'll also add the white colored pencil as well for some, more of some highlights. So what I like to do with the eye is I like to also create a shape around the eye like so. You can make it be very light because we intend to erase that later on. And the reason that I'm making that shape is so that we know that basically we create hairs coming from around the eye, and those hairs will start on the shape that we created. Okay, so we can now put down our pencil. You want to take a look and see if there's anything you need to change. Um, we will have time to kind of erase and lighten up our drawing afterward. But right now, the pencil is, you can use those as guidelines for where you're going to be putting the fur. So let's start off with the eye. Let me just check this pen because I have one pen that I realize, okay, that one's good. Okay. So we're going to start off with the eye. And Rebecca, oh gosh. Rebecca says she thinks hers might be rabid. Oh gosh. You're too funny. You just add a lot of fur. So lots of fur. Okay. I love it. So we're going to start with the eye, inside the eye. And actually, I think I'm going to make the eye a little bit smaller inside. Yeah, maybe that's the problem. Maybe I instructed you to make the eyeball too big, because I'm looking at the top one and I'm going, oh, I don't know. I think the eye might be a little bit smaller. So if I instructed you to make it look like a rabbit eye, you can make it smaller now. And I apologize. So what you would do is cut some off of the this part of it and just make it a little bit smaller there. I'm definitely going to do that. Oh, so funny. And now we can create the shape by outlining. And you want to make sure that, you kind of outline the highlight, and then you're going to start filling in the eye with your black pen, like so. And then once you do that, you then want to go around the eye from, using the, um, the line we made, or I should say, we did the drawing around the eye. And you now want to start adding fur that's coming from there and kind of just sticks up all around. And then it goes in the opposite direction at the bottom of the eye. I'm going to kind of make a little double layer on him here. And then we're going to start creating the fur. So instead of, we see these lines that we've created for the outside of our squirrel, but we're going to use those as guidelines because we don't want to draw on top of those lines. We want to create fur along those lines, because he'll look cartoonish if we do it the other way. And that's not a terrible thing, but we're aiming for a little more realism. So we're going to start off with the face. And so in order to make fur, I'm going to just show this for a second. So in order to make fur, I'm just going to draw this circle so I can show you what I mean. You make lines, but you leave spaces in between the fur. And then you can go back to make it a little furrier. As you can see, it's starting to look a little more like fur by doing it this way. If you were to do it this way, it does look like fur, but fur comes out of the skin all over. And in order to layer it, it has to sometimes come or go in different directions. Sometimes. This one is not. This one is, you can see in the space that it's doing, it's going in different directions. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to show you that. And now we'll start. So the reason I showed you that was because we're going to start here along the nose. And first we're going to create the nose. So it's a little bit pointy there. And then we're going to start creating very small hairs, very small by his nose here. And I'm going to go really close in now so that you can see. And we're going to kind of create a shape around his mouth or nose. So the way I'm doing that is by skipping spaces. And then we also want to create his mouth, the opening of his mouth, by filling in that area once you draw sort of a kind of a flattened oval in a way. And then you can draw his mouth, the bottom of his mouth. It goes like this. Now the rest of it is hair. And some of it is going to be the pencil. So going to make little little shapes of hair. And then we're going to continue going up and around his face up toward his ear. So now that we've made some of these kind of spiky hairs, we're gonna, actually let's go to the right. Let's do that. Let's go to the right up toward this ear. I think that will be better. So we're going to kind of follow the shape of the outline of our squirrel. The entire time we're going to be following the outline along with jumping back and forth inside. But let's follow the shape here, but instead we're going to create hairs that are both outside and inside of the shape of our squirrel here. So we go up towards the ear. You can double back and add some more hairs. You can go very light at first if you're unsure. You can also make some hairs that are kind of sticking out, kind of curving a little bit on the edge there of his face. And then we're going to make the ear. So the hair would be sort of sticking up on the outside, and then there's some hairs that are happening on the inside. So he's starting to get furry. And I think we will also come over to the other ear here. With this one, I did create a bit of the line here on this side. So I did create the line with my pen, but then going around it, I started to make hair on the shape of that ear on the outside. And then started to make hairs around the opening of the ear because we're going to go back there and use pencil for the shading. So now I'm just kind of creating some stray hairs here, again, around the shape of the inside of the ear. And I'm going to add some hairs at the base of the ear too, little hairs like so. And that's going to also fill in a little bit of, near his eye. Or I should say the top of his eye. And then we're going to start going back to this area. So here again, let me show the, just kind of up close. So as you can see, let's pretend this line is still here, the line that we drew, that it's all still here, okay? So the pencil line is still there, but, we go back and we'll erase it later. But for now, we want to create hair that is going in that direction, kind of following that line, but it's not going to be on the exact line. It's going to be above it, below it, because these hairs are coming from, the skin. So let's do that. So here again, so instead, as I mentioned, I'm not going to start that hair on the line that I drew. I'm going to start it underneath, and maybe there is one that is a little bit kind of on. Oops. Sorry, my camera fuzzed out a little bit. So we're going to create hairs that are in that direction, but they're curving more rather than being on a straight line. And then you can make some that are in the same direction. that are kind of underneath him, underneath, I should say, underneath going toward his chin, because there'd be some hairs kind of sticking up out of there, like so. And then you can kind of fill in various hairs to kind of fill up the rest of it. You can make some close together. And I like to make it a little bit darker, sort of a separation of hairs that's starting to happen towards his arm. So we're now going to, create the arm and the hairs again. So if we start kind of on the edge, we have some hairs that are curving around this way. And then the inside hairs are kind of not laying as flat, right? They are going in a different direction. And as we get close to his hands, we can make some hairs right before we get to his little hands here. We have a bit of his chest happening behind here too. So we can make some hairs sticking up sort of on his chest area. It's not really completely his chest. It's more like right underneath his chin. And then we're going to trace his little hands with the black pen. And we can also do the acorn at this stage. Kind of outline the acorn, and then we go back and create shading with the pencil. So again, we outline the acorn in the black pen, and then we'll go back later and create some shading with our pencil. We're going to be doing that in, a lot of these sections. This is kind of, breaking it down for you as we go to each section of our little furry friend here. Okay, so we are going to now go and start working around the back area. So this section here. So again, I'm going to show you the original. So we're going to start working with some even smaller hairs. We've got hairs that are sticking up, going toward the edge of our squirrel. We have really tiny hairs here. And again, notice they're spaced around, so it gives the impression of fur. The hair changes direction along where the leg is, at the hind leg. And then as we get to the bottom, it starts to, the hairs are sticking out and going on the ground, right? So it doesn't look flat. The hairs are actually, because he's, squatting down, they're going to be touching the ground. And then as we look to the tail, we have a darker area going up against the squirrel. And then we've got that middle section that I had you draw. It's going to get a little darker here. But as you're going up to that line, you're going to be thinking about that line, but then you're going to be making curved lines on either side of the line. Almost like, a bush or I guess kind of like a tree. But we'll talk about it more as we get there. And then we've got the same thing that happens in the tail where we've got some hairs that are smaller. And then, of course, hairs that stick out, especially along the edge to indicate that it's very furry. Then, of course, we have the hairs that are hanging down to the fluffy tail. So let's get started on the tail now. So again, we're going to start on the back. Okay, so here again, we have all of our lines drawn for the shape of our squirrel, but we're not drawing those with our pen. We're using the hairs to kind of follow that shape. So maybe a little bit, we can do a little bit of that as we get to the back here. So we kind of start to stagger our hairs like so. Oops. And then we're going to come back over to the legs, and we're going to kind of create a dark area for around here. So we're going to come over here, and the hairs are going to go kind of in a slanted direction. And then again, we kind of make it a little darker and start to follow the shape of this leg, but then this leg is going to be dark hair. So it's not really dark hair, but it's a little more in shadow. So much like what we did with the hairs above, except that we're making them closer together so that it's darker. And we're going, if you notice, we're going in one direction toward the end of the toes and the feet. And then, of course, when you get to those, you want to trace them like so. But keep adding some hair on top of, going over the feet a bit. And let everybody catch up as we start to work near the elbow area. We're going to start to make hairs kind of going in this direction. So for instance, short hairs like so that are spread out at first, like that. And we'll start to layer those as well. But we kind of want to get that direction of, here's part of his belly a little bit. The hairs are kind of starting to go all in this direction. And we're going to work on that, as his body is kind of going in a C shape, like the letter C almost, right? So the hairs in between are going to be kind of mimicking that shape. But again, at first, you want to make short hairs and spaced out so that you can always go back and add more hairs. I'm also making some lighter hairs by not applying too much pressure with the pen at first, right? But you can see that it's already giving the impression of fur. And we do change direction a little bit on the leg, at least at the top. And then we sort of start going in many directions as we head down towards the feet. So remember, we want the hair as it's touching the ground. You can make the curves of the hairs against the ground. Doesn't have to be straight because fur isn't straight. It kind of sticks out all over and it would kind of curve going toward the ground. And then you want to fill in the spots. So we want to add more hair, but for now, we've made him look furry. And so, we can go back and add more fur, especially toward where it meets up with his tail. You can add, really tiny spots of fur. And then towards the bottom, as it hits the ground. And you definitely want to make some that are gathered a little bit right by his foot. And of course, when you get to the foot, you want to outline. But you can see how I've made some fur that is gathered, on top of his foot or toward his foot. And then I'm just going back in and adding random little hairs to make some parts a little more full. And if you're not sure, make really tiny, tiny fur marks. But you can always go back and make them longer and thicker. Now I'm going back and just adding a few more that are a little longer, especially towards his back. So The hair is kind of, standing up just a little bit. Again, I like to make it a little darker where his fur is going to be meeting up with the tail. And then, we're about to go to the tail now. Give everybody just a little time to catch up. Okay, so we are now going to head to the fuzzy tail here. So with the tail, we definitely want to create a rhythm. So basically, like I mentioned, we're going to go darker and longer over here, and then right up against where the body is. And then we're going to start getting shorter lines of fur. And then we'll go longer again right as it gets bushy. So follow me as we start to do that. And I'm going to see if I can kind of put the tail up as well. It looks so weird with just the tail. Oh, okay. Fix this. All right. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to start on this line here that we created. But remember, we're not going to follow the line by creating a line. We're going to follow the line by making fur coming from it on either side. So if I'm starting off here, I'm going to make some fur like that first. And then on the other side, I want to make some bushy fur. And remember, longer strokes as we're getting toward the top. And then we're going to come back down over to the back part, and we're going to make kind of a line of fur. And these are going to be a little shorter than what we've been doing. Closer together. Especially at the bottom here. And so just like we did inside the body, we're going to create, there we go. We're going to create space by making lines like this. Also going, toward the edge of the tail here. So I just did make one kind of curved line here to indicate that the tail is curving. And then going along the edge of the tail that we drew, I'm creating hairs along the edge. But if you notice, what I'm doing is alongside of the line, I'm making hairs that are sticking out in either direction. And then we do the same thing that we've done with the body is we go back into the middle areas and we start to fill in the hairs. And here again, you can now start to make them a little shorter and closer together. And then I like to, go back and make the hairs a little darker towards the body. By going back again with the pen. You can also make your tail a little fluffier if you want. By expanding the shape a little bit. And when you're ready, you can go in and start tracing your landscape. Mainly the outside of the rocks and outside of the leaves. And then we're going to be going back and adding shading to everything as a last touch to everything. Um, Adding shading and some white colored pencil. So again, this I go pretty fast with the, and kind of, I don't want to say sloppy, but I'm not worried about a whole lot of precise detail when I come down to my landscape. I kind of want it to look wild. And when you are ready, you can start to add shading to the landscape. And then we're also going to go inside the squirrel to do that as well. But what we do with our pencil and the landscape is turn our pencil or hold our pencil like this so that we're using the side of it and we're kind of coloring in the ground. So we're coloring or shading, I should say, in between the stones and the leaves. And we even go up against our squirrel. Again, we're basically shading the ground with our pencil. And you can get lighter in certain spots because the ground would be like that. So the pencil, adds a little bit to the ground, and it's going to do the same thing with the squirrel. So the darker parts on the squirrel are like inside the ear, right? So we want to kind of color inside the ear. The other thing about this is if you want to go back and add some more of the ink, you're welcome to do that too. But, shading a little bit with the pencil really helps. So I went inside the ear, and then I'm even going to go on the other side where the other ear is, but I'm going to go on top of the fur and go towards the nose and shade, the top of his nose a little bit and a little bit of his face toward his mouth. And then even on his bottom area here. I'm going to go in really close now so you can see the shading. Basically, there might be some dark hair right underneath his chin here. So we're going to add a little shading there. And also, he's right where the hair, where he's sort of scrunched up here. There, and then even on the back of him, right? The back of his fur as it's against his tail. Because, our last part is going to be just adding a little bit of the white. I keep wanting to say white crayon for some reason. Not the white crayon, white colored pencil. White crayon probably wouldn't be too bad. So I'm just, shading a little bit the edge of him here. I like to add some to his feet. Basically kind of the edge here and then the bottom of his feet a little bit. And then I like to also shade. I shade quite a bit in his tail. I shade towards the edge of where his tail would be. Basically kind of shade almost his entire tail. And I don't shade it to a point where it's, all pencil, but especially in the darker areas, like I'm going over, right where all the dark ink is, and I'm pressing a little harder. And then the white I like to go a little bit around his eye, like the outside of it. Um, oh, you know what? You know what part we forgot? The acorn. Forgot. I take the pencil as well and just shade at the bottom of the acorn where the point is and a little bit above it. Yeah, little there. So again, with the white, I like to kind of scatter the white around for obviously the lightest parts. So I go on his hands. I kind of scribble a bit on his hands to make them a little whiter. I do a little on the acorn. Again, these are just, lightened spots. I do some on each part of his feet, sort of where, on the top part of the feet, like so. I think you can see it there. Um, Even in, the landscape, I use it on the leaves. I kind of scribble a little on the leaves, the whites of the mushroom. I do kind of a scribble, on the rocks. This is just to indicate some lightness. And I do it toward the tops of the grass. And then finally, I like to do it on the tip of the tail, right on the top, and then a little bit throughout the tail, not on the dark part, and then maybe a little bit in the body. And again, I just, kind of pick random areas where I want, I think to myself, maybe there'd be some lighter spots, like on his leg. And you can hear it sounds like I'm, creating the fur again with the white. Sometimes I color it in a little bit, and then other times I actually, you know, kind of create fur with it. But that just gives it a little more, lightness to it. And we now have a little furry friend, our gray toned autumn squirrel. And I am so excited to see what all of yours look like. So I'm going to stop the recording.